Eryk from Frinksmovement TV. Welcome back to the podcast. Appreciate you coming back for round number 2.
Appreciate for letting me be here for the second time. Last time I think it was summer, right? Like 2022.
Yeah, it was,
Um,
I think, 13, 11 months ago, 12 months ago, about a year-ish ago, I think.
oh, that's longer than I thought.
Yeah,
So that came quite quickly. But yeah, appreciate for letting me speak for a second time.
of
Excited for
course.
it.
It was a blast last time, and one of the things I really like about some of these conversations I have are the conversations where we end up talking about something I do not anticipate at all. So, for example, last time we ended up talking about education, which I loved, but I did not expect to talk to you about that at all.
Yeah.
And it's so nice because sometimes we just end up going with the flow and see where the conversation takes us. And those are some of my favorite podcasts to do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, like the best part is when like the most boring conversations that like that could be done are the ones that are completely scripted, I think. And there is like no other thing that comes out of them. And I think that I had this problem when I was doing my interviews. Many times I tried to be too scripted, and I didn't allow for expanding the range of topics. But I think right now, like what, like last time it was really great. I didn't expect to talk about these topics as well. It was kind of, I was unprepared as well, which adds the like a little bit of, maybe stress that you don't want to talk, like you want to stay, within your range of expertise at one, like on one side, but on the other side, you still want to, express your points in a good way.
It feels more authentic to also to come not as prepared, I guess, even though it sounds bad to not be prepared, but it just adds the element of authenticity, I think.
Absolutely. I think, especially for me, like I'm really like a control freak in that sense. I'm very, like I'm very careful about what I'm saying all the time in terms of like the public setting, even if it's, like not a huge exposure. What I'm doing, like what I'm doing is not like huge, like I don't have, millions watching me or something like that, but I'm still like having this pressure. And I think this gets me out of comfort zone. So it's really good. It's really cool.
Yeah, we have a lot of pressure on us now to perform just as good as last time.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, really quickly, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, but YouTube tells me that 99% of people watching the podcast are not subscribed yet, which is quite a lot. So if you can do me the small favor and hit that subscribe button, it takes less than 3 seconds for you and it's absolutely free, but it helps out the podcast so much more than you realize. I would really highly appreciate that. The bigger the podcast gets, the bigger the guests we can have on. And the bigger the guests we can have on, the more value I can provide to you, which is ultimately the entire goal of the podcast, of course. So hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it and enjoy the rest of the episode.
So what do we talk about today? I
I
don't
would,
know.
I would love to know what's new for you since we last spoke.
Okay, sure. Um, so first of all, I grew my hair a bit,
Yeah?
and that's it actually. No, to be honest, it was quite a bit of like hustle this period. I have about I'm about to finish my university degree in like 3 months. So currently I'm working on my master's paper, and I'm doing a little study that we the aim of that study is to basically do the work for the master's paper that is required to do, because you have to do some project of this type after like the like finishing like in order to finish your degree. But at the same time, along with my supervisor, we decided that I'm gonna try to publish the article. It's actually related to front lever calisthenics
Oh, nice.
exercise. I managed to somehow like because I had a personal like interest in this project. before, like in this topic. I mean, in the past, it's just easier for me to, like I have all the data, I have all the things that I kind of like was prepared for. I mean, like what I prepared for the YouTube videos that I've been doing. I had all of these, but I didn't. But this gave me an opportunity to test some of these ideas in practice. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm actually doing the study. I have 11 people that do the study. I can tell you more later on if you want. It's quite, boring, I think, to explain like the whole thing. But I aim for 15 people to do it. And, hopefully at the end of this year, maybe we're going to get it published, which would be pretty cool because there's no study like that. And it would either prove or disprove some of the points that I've been doing in the videos, like theoretically. So, like it's always a nice opportunity to learn something new, I guess.
Wait, so are you trying to teach these 15 people the front lever?
No. So what I'm actually doing is I'm having a group of people that can do at least. So you're probably familiar with like the progressions of the these static horizontal lever based skills in calisthenics.
I am, but the viewers might not be.
Oh yeah, sure. So when you do something like front lever or planche, these are like strength gymnastics elements that are pretty popular in calisthenics, where your task is to hold this position, and the more you extend your body, the more difficult this position is. And the planche is basically like the push-up position where your legs are levitating, sort of. Obviously, they're not levitating, but like there is that impression when you look at planche, and
they're off the ground.
Yeah, you're off the ground, and in front lever you're in the horizontal position, hanging from the bar. And so when you look at like mechanically at these movements, it's pretty like on one hand it's pretty simple, on the other hand it's complicated to like notice what's going on. And I made this analysis, for example, in my video, The Problem with Front Lever. I made this analysis like what does front lever requires, because most people when they see it, they think that it's mostly about their core, it's mostly about holding their body like in the air basically. But what's a more maybe accurate representation of the limiting factor in the front lever is that it's our back, like the muscles that are responsible for extending shoulder. By extending, I mean like pulling the shoulder down, like imagine in the pull-up or something, right? We're doing this motion down here. And the thing is, you have to like do it because your body tries, like gravity, obviously, like working on your body tries to like pull it down, and your muscles are pulling on the body to get it up. And what's really nice about both of these exercises is that your center of mass always, like if your body is statically, either suspended or supported, your body, in order to stay like horizontal and statically maintain that balance, your center of mass needs to be above your center, like above your like pressure points, right? So your hands. And so you can see that people doing these exercises, they're leaning back or leaning forward in order to do it. And the nice thing is, or like nice, for some people nice, for some not, but the actual distance, like where that center of mass is on your body, determines the difficulty of the exercise. And so one way, that's why, doing this position in tag version, for example, or tag, advanced tag, straddle, is easier than doing it in full. And so like the progression for these exercises basically looks like this. You're extending your body until you're able to hold the full version, although it's very difficult, obviously, right? Because the torque that you need to develop with your shoulder, like with your muscles that are extending the shoulder, is pretty high. So once you have this foundation and that understanding, it's worth to note that people are also different, like people are different in terms of like their build, right? And that's what I'm testing. I'm testing how much people are differing in terms of their center of mass position in the front lever. So I take people who can do advanced tuck, which is the position where you have 90 degrees in your hips and 90 degrees in your knees, right? Like I use specifically this position. It's more like statistically, it's like more possible that it's like easier to spot this position because like if I said tuck, then everyone would tuck a little bit less, right? Or a little bit more. It's like more subjective. Where here, like I have the actual angles. And we are recording people from the side when they are doing it, and they have there is like a big ruler for the measurement, for the reference point. And so on the picture, then I will be able to see what's the distance between their shoulders and like the bar. So what's the angle that they are doing. And some people will lean more, and these are the people that are less for like, they're a little bit less predisposed for the front lever in that like purely mechanical sense because their center of mass is farther, so they need to lean more back. And I want to see how different are people from each other in that respect, right?
So how are their center of mass more forward than others? Is it like because they have a bigger upper body, smaller lower body, or somebody has a bigger lower body than their upper body?
Yeah, so it's a very good point. So basically, just finishing on that point, I'm doing like other things as well. I'm actually measuring their bodies as well in terms of anthropometry. So anthropometry is this, I think it's a discipline of body measurement. So you basically do, like you're measuring girths, you're measuring lengths, heights, and stuff like that. Obviously body mass as well. And you're making these measurements and you're just then comparing that to a certain, like models that are used in data. So you can see that proportionally, this person has very long arms, for example, right? Or this person has a very like large torso. Then what I'm doing, they are also, because we are doing it in the lab, they are testing their isometric strength. So how much torque they can actually develop. And so imagine that there are two people and both of them weigh, let's say their weight is 80 kilos, right? And imagine that they are testing their strength in this extension, right? Which is angle pretty similar to what they're doing in the front lever. And imagine that they are doing, like they're able to generate, let's say 150 Newton meters, right? Both of them have the same strength, but one of these people is able to do front lever and the second is not. Imagine that, right? Both people, same relative strength to their body weight, but one of them is able to do it. Obviously, one interpretation is that there is some sort of technique. That's true. Maybe like there is some activation element that people are able to do in the front lever. Some others are not able to do it. But you can still like not overlook physics. Like you can, like front lever is not that complicated exercise. You can teach it. Like if someone has strength to do it, you can teach it literally in 10 minutes. And it's like, I always make it instruction, but there are still huge differences between people. I was one of these people, or my brother. My brother is like, he has like 60 kilos weighted pull-up,
Wow.
And he weighs like 78. Like he has tremendous strength, but he's not able to do full front lever. There are people, I know people who are like much weaker relatively, they can still do front lever. And I just want to see that, so apart from that, like you ask me what determines that center of mass position. Well, purely theoretically, if you have more muscular lower body, less muscular upper body, and also longer torso, that would be the worst possible build for the front. Oh, and you're like, you have a big height. These would be the biggest, like negative factors for the front lever. Because the longer like our torso is generally heavier than our lower body. Like if you would like cut your torso like this and you would take like a chunk of it, it would be heavier than our lower body, right? So people with longer legs would have like this center of mass relatively higher, right? And then height determines like on absolute where that center of mass is. And obviously, like how muscular, how big your legs are. and your upper body. Like theoretically, in front lever, if you would have like very muscular neck and like very huge head, it would be a huge advantage in front lever. It would kind of like work,
Yeah.
on like for your favor, right? So it's interesting because, like then you can find out that, for example, there are some people that can do it pretty easily, and like not pretty easily, like they're still very strong people, like don't get me wrong, right? But that there are huge differences. And you may ask, why do I do it in like physiotherapy, right? Because it's like, how is that related? Part of it is like my, curiosity, and I'm just more interested about that, to be honest. But you could make a case that it could show that maybe like front lever, imagine that there are these differences between people. It would indicate that front lever is not a good exercise for testing that strength. It would be really good if it would be working, then it's really good because it's like cheap. It's, like you need only a bar, you don't need any weights, you don't like, it's very accessible and very cheap. But if there are so big differences between people, even though they have the same strength, they're still not able to do, that makes front lever not reliable, not reliable test for shoulder extension strength.
But isn't it interesting that I think it goes very well with what is it called? Physical therapy? Why can I never pronounce that?
Yeah.
Physical therapy?
Yeah,
because
physical
it's about
therapy.
the
Like physio, I think it's physical therapy. I think, to be honest, I don't know like the terminology in English, but I think like physical therapy could refer to like using physical, because we had like we had this subject where we were doing all these like electrical things and ice, and using like the sort of like physical things, like the temperature, like lasers and stuff like that. Oh my god, worst student ever. But like what I mean, it's and it was called something. Yeah, it was called physico, which could mean physical in English.
like physics?
Yeah, like physics, like more physics related.
Okay.
And like the name of the whole thing is physiotherapy. Like that's the title that you're getting,
Okay.
sort of. So I don't know, but it's certainly like it's certainly like everyone knows what you're talking about, so we don't need to spend time on it.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense because it's about the human anatomy, and if two people with the same strength, one person can do the front lever, another person can't. I mean, it's pretty relatable to the anatomy of the body. Then the length of the limbs, as you talked about. I think it's a great subject. I think it sounds really, really exciting.
Thank you. I think that for now I get like two impressions. Some people are very excited and they tell me, all people that were studied, for example, they were very, interested in the results and stuff like that. And I managed to get quite a diverse population of people. So I had a gymnast, I had a person who is like 195 centimeters. I had a person, like that trains swimming, very like build that is like very swimming-ish. And like different like types of body, and many people could do full front lever. So I kind of like added it to the study. So like people who were able to do, I asked them, so we could also take the recording of them in the full front lever position. And here is what's funny. I have a theory that if, for example, like I consider myself to be quite bad at front lever in comparison to other things. So I could do like in my prime, before I became calisthenics nerd and I was like calisthenics athlete, I could do like, handstand presses, handstand push-ups. I could even do, like I could do straddle planche, but that's kind of like unrelated for now. I had a really good strength in terms of, like vertical pulling, vertical pushing, where your body is kind of like the distribution of your body, like where your center of mass is, doesn't matter, right? But for example, with front lever, I was very good in this advanced tuck, but I didn't manage to hold full, never. And my theory could be that for me, the jump between advanced tag and full is huge. And for some people, the jump between advanced tag and full is not that big. And so I measured a couple of people who did full front lever, and what's the difference between their progressions? Because maybe some person has really like huge calves and huge like thighs, and then when you extend your thighs, then they will contribute to that to that migration of center of mass, which is pretty interesting to see for me. And I think, like it's also a good discussion to have sometimes about, like when I train people, for example, in terms of calisthenics, and when I have, like not only clients, but even people who are just asking for a general advice, I think it's important conversation to have that some skills, because of your build, you will have tremendous disadvantage to perform these skills. And it's important to know that, because that's going to make the time longer. Maybe you're doing everything right. Maybe like your program is right, your dedication, everything is right. It's just going to take you more time because, like you have this anthropometry issues, not issues, characteristics.
Yeah, that's very important for people to understand in any area of life, that you cannot compare yourself to others. Like, I remember when I started calisthenics, and I would be really upset because I didn't progress as fast as some of the YouTubers I saw or influencers I saw online. And I think it's important for people to understand that you will not progress the same as other people, because you're not that person. Your anatomy is different. Your training is probably a bit different. The way you eat is different. There are so many factors that make you different from other people.
Absolutely. And so many of these factors are out of your control. I had this conversation with my friend Yad from Netherlands. We actually recorded a podcast, and second edition of our podcast that we did, and we didn't upload it finally. I don't remember why, but it's just like, he was just like, he finished his medicine degree, and he wanted to, like, he was all over the place with time, me as well, and I don't know like how that happened, but I remember we had this conversation, right? And it became very philosophical very fast. It was like, okay, yeah, like this, and you cannot change this, right? So the only thing so he said that he gets philosophical about like sports in general, because in sports, like sometimes it's a question of like, is it like just the competition of like who has the best genes plus work ethic? And then I came and I said, yeah, and on top of that, like add that maybe like work ethic is also somewhat genetic driven. And he was like, okay, stop right now, because it's getting just too dark. Yeah, like you can get fatalistic sometimes about it, so it's not the point to do so. It's just a point to like be aware of certain limitations, because that can help you have realistic expectations. That's my intention with, for example, this kind of study. It's never to say that you cannot do something. It's just like to give you kind of like a healthy and pretty like reasonable excuse, that it's not an excuse that you're not working hard enough, but it's like you actually need to develop, like you need to produce more torque, more force to do it. So you actually need to, like it's different. But you're right, it kind of like goes to all areas of life, I guess.
Do you think there are some calisthenic skills that some people, no matter how hard they train, they just cannot get there? For example, the front lever.
I certainly do. I certainly do believe that. And I think that I cannot really make this point, like I cannot make this point because it's like rather statistical issue. Like maybe like, I don't know, because I know what it takes to do, for example, front lever or planche, right? Like mechanically speaking, you have to develop a certain torque that will oppose the torque that is the resistance. And resistance is basically the, like we're talking about the prime movers. Like obviously you need to hold your body straight, but I'm talking about our bodies as like the rigid object here. I assume that everyone will be able to learn how to, like do like how to hold their body straight with their like core and stuff like that, or like with lower back in planche. But the problem is the shoulder. And I think that, yeah, like mechanically speaking, you could make the equation and see how many like Newton meters someone needs to develop with their shoulders.
What is a Newton meter?
Yeah, Newton meter is like the torque. It's like, the distance plus the force. So force will be determined by your mass plus like mass, in terms of like mass times gravity, or yeah, like in terms of, like how much, like how many newtons your body sort of generates, or like gravity is pulling your body with.
Okay.
Obviously, the higher mass, the more gravity, like the more force gravity is pulling with, like the higher attraction to Earth. Fun fact: there are some places on Earth where gravity is a little bit smaller. Like the attraction will be a little bit smaller. So, but that's only the difference of like maybe 2 kilograms or 1 kilogram. Like the altitude.
What causes that? The altitude?
Yeah, like there are a couple of reasons for that. So I think like, so first of all, there is the altitude, but there is also the like there are some like other aspects of it related to the fact that Earth is not like fully round.
Yeah.
It's like
It's
like
oval.
So the distance of like center of Earth is different dependent on where you are. So that distance determines then, like how much it pulls with. But these are like minimal differences. Probably they are important for some like other areas, like, but geologically there are some differences in terms of like local geology that will also matter. I think it's the concentration of some materials or something. I'm not a physics expert, so I don't know. But like it was just fun for me to look it up. So like so there are differences apparently, and yes, like there are, but we can make that like simple equation anyways, that your mass times, let's say 9.8 meters per second square, and times like your like the number of kilograms, and then this times the distance from the pivot point, which is your shoulder, to the center of mass of your body. And so naturally, the closer that distance is, and the less you weigh, the less is going to be for planche. And obviously, there are internal factors. By the way, your muscles can be attached a little bit closer to the joint or farther from the joint, and they will be pulling with like more or less force. So it's more complicated. But I'm just like, to answer your question, I think there are skills that definitely are not like out of reach, like Maltese and Victorian cross. I think these would be, for people that don't know, they are like harder versions of planche and front lever, simply said. And yeah, and I think that they are like for a distinct group of people, especially Victorian cross. Other skills, I don't have a data to say that. Like Victorian is just like so difficult. It's just like so biomechanically and mechanically, like everything works against you in this. So like, even gymnasts, like you very rarely see that in gymnastics. I think it was Danny Rodriguez that came up with this skill. Or maybe I'm wrong here, but it was not that long ago. And, like, this is professional Olympic gymnasts, right? Like this guys, like these are the guys that train since, being a child, and also they have good proportions and everything, right? Like that's the same thing as in NBA, like, yeah. So I don't want to say that other skills like planche and front lever are, out of reach, but, there will be huge differences between people. That's what I'm going to say.
It's crazy to think that there are more advanced levels than planche and front lever, which seem to be so advanced already.
Yeah. They became a, like, it's funny because a couple of years ago, I don't know how long have you been in like calisthenic circles, let's say?
7 years.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
quite a long time. So I think that we could start, like I started, I think like maybe it could be 9 years ago. But you probably remember like the times where, like muscle up was impressive,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Hannibal for King, Dennis Minin. I remember like Dennis Minin, one of his videos. I think it was like that like that video, like it was for me, it was like seeing a superhuman. And I was getting back to this video after, like 5 years, and I'm looking at someone who is doing like muscle ups, human flag, one arm pull out. Okay, these are, amazing skills, and still like most people, the majority of people will never, like for most of them it will be very impressive.
Mm.
But at the same time, like consider what's happening now. These
Yeah.
are not like elite, right? And yeah, and I don't want to spoil too much because I have so much to talk about it. And maybe we can set up conversation after my like video
Sure.
when,
Yeah.
when I drop it, because like many of these topics will be there. But just want to say that I actually am working on the other study that I've been working on more like in an online sort of setting. And there are some crazy people out there. There are people
Mm.
that can hold front lever for 50 seconds
That's
and
insane.
planche for 35 seconds. And I kind of like and I had a chance to gather a couple of these people and have like gather some data from them, let's
Mm.
say. And it's going to be very interesting, but I'm not going to spoil it yet. But yeah, there are people like that, but they're pretty specific, in terms of many aspects, like many things.
What does your workout routine look like right now?
So my training right now is like basically, it's funny because it came back to like the most simplistic, like the more I expanded the complexity of what I'm thinking about in terms of like working with, like not even working with other people, but like especially doing these projects and like self-education, the more I do so, the more my own training becomes simpler. I don't
Mm.
know what's the deal with that, but it's like the less I am, like the less curious even I am in terms of my own training. I'm not gonna lie, like I cannot lie. I have to say that my training for the past probably like 2 years was not on top. It was probably one of the areas that lacked, and I'm not happy with it. But it's like at the same time, I had to make some sacrifice because like emotionally it was not like the thing that was most important for me. Like I felt that like in order to focus on other areas I needed to kind of like back off a little bit.
Mm.
But the problem with me is that I cannot back off for a little bit. Like I'm kind of like this all or nothing person,
Yeah.
which is very difficult to it's like it's not good. Like you probably notice that it's better to do something for 50% than do nothing. uh, or all or nothing. This all or nothing mentality is not very helpful. But my training currently consists of 2 upper body sessions per week and one lower body session per week. And in upper body, I'm starting with some planche work. And then after that, it's basically mostly weight training. And so I'm starting with this planche. This planche is like my body weight goal right now. I'm doing some handstand before. I'm doing some presses, but it's not really scheduled. And then what I'm doing is just like this planche and then upper body workout that is more like street lifting and also a little bit of like weights at the end. So like, classic body weight, like bodybuilding type of workout. And I do it for both upper body days, but I switched on, like the exercise selection is a little bit different between each of these days. So for example, on one day I'm doing pull-ups, on the second day I'm doing chin-ups. I'm doing different variations, experimenting with different accessory movements for different body parts. And once I find some that is like fitting my, like I feel it sort of, then I do it for the next 6 weeks or something. And then I change it. And for lower body, I basically do like loaded I'm doing squats and I'm doing Romanian deadlifts as like the strength work. And then I'm doing loaded stretches like Jefferson curls, like pancake, like loaded pancake, or like sometimes good morning, like the seated good morning, and some passive stretches at the end. And sometimes during a week, I'm going to also do like at home doing the second stretching session, but sometimes it doesn't happen. So, it's currently, like it's currently it for now. I know it doesn't seem to be much for a person that is like so into like these topics, but yeah, that's how it is. That's the reality right now. So 3 days a week, 2 upper, 1 lower.
You do a lot of stretching. I feel like I saw an Instagram post maybe of you doing the splits. Is that right?
Yeah, like I was doing that in the past, not anywhere near, like I'm not anywhere near right now to do it. But I was able to do like I think the front split, and I was pretty close to side split, but I never, or like middle split, dependent on the terminology. But I never actually, I think like it was always like a centimeter or two that I was lacking. But yeah, but that was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Then I switched more to body weight strength, like more I kind of like for 90-degree push-up and stuff like that. But this stretching period was I was very like quite flexible. I think like I came to a quite good level of flexibility, but yeah,
How
but I kind of like stopped with it.
how do you learn the splits? Where does one start?
uh with the front split or like with the middle split? I think that there's a huge difference, or like maybe the difference, or no, like maybe the advice is actually the same, but there's a difference in difficulty. Like most people will get front split probably with like consistent practice, and middle split might need like much more of that,
Okay.
for most people, because there's a lot of like also like limiters in terms of like anthropometry. So for example, like men need to do it a little bit differently because of how their like femur is built. So they need to do like more of these anterior pelvic tilt. But simple advice for me would be, once you have a decent so there are different, I'm not a flexibility expert, by the way. If someone is very interested in flexibility, I would recommend my the account flexibility.research on Instagram. That's the best. No, Dan is my friend. We actually spoke, but it's not unreleased yet.
Okay.
But we actually had a conversation, and it's unmatched, like the level of knowledge that this guy has. So whatever I'm gonna say here, make a second look at what Dan's gonna say. I know he has like some materials, both free and paid, but he has tons of free content there, and I would definitely recommend to look at it. He's just like into it for the past like 20 years or something, and he's really into like the research. But typically what you see is that men are stronger, and because they are stronger, they will benefit a lot. Like majority of men will benefit a lot from like active stretches. By active stretches, what I mean is stretching that is caused like the resistance, or like the force that is stretching us comes from our muscles, or we are opposing the stretch with our muscles. So there is our muscles are basically active when stretching, right? And I think for majority of people, I would recommend using this type of stretches. It's not mandatory, because you can see like gymnastics girls that can do splits without much strength, right? They can just like fall into the split. They're not able to get back, but they're very flexible. You can see that, right?
What's an
Uh,
example of an active stretch?
the example of active stretch would be, I can give you, so like the basic like split of stretching, we could say that it's there are two like aspects. So the stretch can be either passive or active, and simultaneously the same stretch can be dynamic or static. So there are four combinations. So there can be dynamic active stretch, it would be something like lifting your leg, for example, to the split, or like standing and trying to lift it, right?
Okay.
Or it would be, if we are talking about, tensing the muscle that is actually being stretched, it would be, for example, going to the side split and then sliding back up, and then going to the side split and then sliding back up. You don't have to go all the way down, but it's like the exercise, right? That would be active dynamic. Passive dynamic would be simply me as a therapist, for example, taking your leg and just moving it to the stretch position and getting back. You're passive, you're not tensing your muscles, but they are being stretched dynamically.
So dynamic means that it's moving.
It's moving, exactly. And active, and same thing with the static. So static active stretch would be basically holding a side split where you're resisting gravity, like gravity is trying to pull you to the side split and you're resisting it, sort of, and tensing the muscles. That's called PNF sometimes as well. And passive, what's the last one? Passive,
Static?
sorry, active, passive static. Passive static is like, let's say you're in the pancake, or like the same split that you were doing, but you're basically relaxing. You put your torso on like a bed or like a chair or something, and you're just totally relaxing and letting your body go into this position. So, this is the basic split, and I would basically recommend, if you're starting out and if you're a person that is quite strong, to do mostly active stretches and add some passive on top of it. And if you're a person that is not very strong, then I think that it would be the best to use mostly passive stretches, but also build strength and do the active. And I think in terms of what exercises you should actually be doing, your number one exercise should be the actual split. So even if you're far away from the split, you can still do it. You can still train your body for this position. You simply go into the split and you're trying to hold it, right? And then after you're done with this, let's say a couple of sets, then you're going and you're doing accessory exercises. Just like in the gym, you do accessories. Here you can do also accessories. And when doing accessories, you just choose the musculature that is being stretched in the split, and you try to tackle it directly. So for example, in the front split, your hip flexors and your quads are being stretched, right? Like your quads, like your
Hamstrings.
rectus femoris, hamstrings as well, the front leg of the hamstring, right? So you can do separate exercises for the front leg and for the back leg. You can do also specific stretching for, for the calf in some manner. So you basically choose different exercises for these muscles and you just stretch them out. And that's basically how I would approach it. That's pretty short version. Obviously, there is a lot of nuance into it. There is a lot of programming. Then what happened, once you choose it, actually, how many times a week? Probably I would start with maybe 2 times a week and just do it. And then as you progress more, then you can start doing some lighter sessions as well at home, for example, right? But I'm not going to go over the full programming because that takes a lot of time. It's going to be personalized for every individual. But these are the basics that I would go for right now. And once again, I'm not an expert in flexibility, actually.
When I practiced the front split, I used to do it every single day, and I did not make progress because I didn't realize that, just like with strength training, you need to recover as well when you stretch.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Most people actually use stretching as a recovery modality, which is funny because okay, it can be used as such, but in a very specific context, because stretching itself also causes fatigue.
Yeah.
Actual fatigue, physiologically it causes fatigue, and you can see that doing stretches before, for example, before performing strength exercise, before displaying your strength, right away before doing that, you will have lower strength many times. And that's because like it worked in a similar way as doing a set of exercise before displaying the set, the strength in the set would work. So it's basically like a similar thing where stretching also generates fatigue. Not gonna get into that because there are many types of fatigue. There are like peripheral fatigue, central fatigue, but stretching kind of like also make, like stretching can cause hypertrophy as well, right? Like stretching, there is a lot of like research showing, and it makes sense like physiologically, because like you're basically, like stretching the muscle, and they're like passive, like there is a molecule called titin within the muscle, and you're like, when you stretch it, it provides passive tension, just like our like, like myosin actin, maybe someone like heard in biology or something, they are producing the active force. Our muscles are also producing force passively, and that passive tension then is detected by some receptors in our muscles, and it causes the muscle to get longer actually. So hypertrophy itself would be like the muscle get bigger like this, right? And this specific hypertrophy caused by stretching, sometimes called sarcomerogenesis, is like muscles getting longer. So like it's getting longer. So like that's the adaptation, and that's why many studies show that after program consisting of stretches, for example, like with calf or something, right? They're doing stretches, and their like muscle volume is increasing after the period of, let's say, 6 weeks of training, which is pretty interesting. And stretching is a powerful tool in general. I would recommend that to many people.
But is that why you often hear people talk about doing full range of motion in an exercise? Because at the elongated part, you stretch the muscle before you contract it?
Very valid, like very good connection of points. Yeah. So the topic itself is a bit more complicated, and I'm also like not a physiologist, right? So all these topics I kind of like that are not the like strictly the area of my expertise. I'm making a disclaimer that I'm kind of like talking, from my knowledge, which could be, like there is more complexity to it. But basically, like this passive tension that I mentioned to you is exactly why, for example, we are able to lift more weight when lowering down than when lifting, right? There is gravity, like you have to like overcome inertia, for example, when lifting dumbbell up. So there is like physical aspect. But even without that, even without like gravity, even like our muscles when elongating, they're much stronger than when contracting. And the reason for that is that these passive forces work when elongating. So imagine, apart from our cross bridges, which are producing this active tension, right? We also have the passive tension, like this molecule titin, but also like there are some other structures that cause passive tension likely, but titin is the main one. It's a string that kind of like unravels as you pull the muscle. And when that muscle is active and you do it, it's even stronger effect than when passively doing it, right? Because like of some, calcium ions related things. So when you do like eccentric, that's going to provide more passive tension. And that's why after eccentric, you will see in data many times more of the like this lengthening of the muscle. And the same thing happens at the end of the stretch. And so when you do exercise and you're coming to the end of the range of motion, you will experience passive tension, and that passive tension will create more of the growth than it would if you would not come to full range of motion. So like if you're doing that, yeah. The caveat to that is that some people, or like some scientific commentators are mentioning that it doesn't work for every single muscle, that some muscles are not long enough, like they sarcomeres are just like too long, so that there is no way that even like by stretching you will develop that tension. But yes, that's why full range of motion is causing more hypertrophy many times than not full range of motion. Very like well spotted on your part here, because it's the same exact mechanism.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I've always wondered then why you see. Well, no, you don't always see this, but like I feel like you often see these huge bodybuilders. They never do full range of motion, or is that just me?
Uh, you know,
I mean, you can't speak for everyone, of course. Like it's
yeah,
not
sure.
generally, but I feel
I
like you see
think.
that a lot. Like people half rep, like these big bodybuilders half rep,
Mhm.
and they're what do you call that? Not excuse. Let's call it an excuse. Is that to keep the muscle more tense, or your focus is more on that muscle, and if you do full range of motion, it becomes more of a compound exercise sometimes. Like you
Mhm.
isolate the muscle more if you do half reps.
Mhm. Yeah, I get the narrative, and maybe sometimes it's valid. Like maybe, like for example, if I want to train like my brachioradialis, for example, and if I want to do it by doing this, then I have to like make sure that I'm working, but I'm not working my bicep, like I'm doing the actual. So brachioradialis will actually do this motion more, and it will do it with pronated grip more. So it will be more active when doing this than like going to full range of motion. Like here is going to be more bicep, and here is going to be more brachioradialis. So like if I want to target this specific muscle, it would make sense to like do this maybe, because like here I don't get any more stimulus. But like the problem with this is that like there is like no explanation. I feel like bodybuilders would still probably like, I guess one of the reasons could be that this process that I mentioned to you, this like elongating of the muscles, it actually lasts for not that long, because like it's actually taking, like in research you will see that it's growing for a couple of weeks and then it stops, unlike normal hypertrophy. The reason probably why it stops is because as muscle gets longer, then after some time you're not able anymore to generate that passive tension anymore, because like the muscle is longer. So
Hmm.
maybe bodybuilders that are advanced already came to this point. They got their kind of like their adaptation, and they stopped with it maybe. At the same time, it could be just anecdotal thing that like you saw some bodybuilders and maybe they're doing it but they are just like showing differently, or
Of course,
maybe
yeah.
or maybe like these bodybuilders are so good that they could be even like they could make even more gains, but they're leaving some on the table, but they're still winning trophies. Obviously there is like more stuff to it, like genetics and like related to like chemistry stuff, and like many things that can influence why that's the case. So I cannot really like speak on that, but like that's like that we can only hypothesize, I guess. um but yeah, like that's the best answer I can give you, sorry.
No, that's okay. So, okay, going back to the stretching. So, if you get fatigued from stretching, would you do it? When would you do it during the day? If you wouldn't do it before a workout.
Mhm. Like ideally in the other session. So ideally, I would do like dependent on what is my priority. But I would recommend, like simple recommendation would be to do your training session and then just like stretch the muscle groups that were not trained.
Mm.
That's simple and works, and that's what I'm doing. So let's say you're splitting your workout to upper body and lower body. Then on upper body, you're gonna like stretch your lower body muscles, and on your lower body day, you will stretch your upper body muscles. Right?
Mm.
It could be a simple way to manage things. Other than that, you can do just a different set. I don't remember about like the stretching, like what type of fatigue did it cause, because if it caused the like one of these long-term peripheral fatigue, because like central nervous system fatigue, so called many times, it's like um it's not a like itself, it doesn't last long. It's pretty like fast. It's contrary to many things that you can hear online, but um like this peripheral fatigue, like there are some types of this peripheral fatigue that happen inside the muscle that are very long lasting, that can take, for example, like 2 days or 3 days to recover, right? And I think that depending on that, I would advise. So I don't remember right now, but depending on this information, I would then say that it's either okay to do stretching, like just like for example, like an hour after. I know many people who do their training, then they're coming to home, they're taking a shower or something, and then they're just like doing some stretches. I know plenty of people who do that, and probably it just works just fine. Like honestly, like the things that I'm talking about, it's nice to talk about these things, and it's like interesting, right? Especially for someone like me. But people are looking for a practical like application and practical advice, and the best thing that you can do is to just like find some time to do it, some stretching. And no matter what that time will be, like if you cannot do it this way that I mentioned, with like cross splitting, you can just stretch after your workout and it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be better than doing nothing, like doing no stretches, right?
Yeah.
So time of a day is only like another consideration that you can make to make your program a little bit maybe more like accustomed to you, but it's not going to be a major factor in my opinion. Like the organization itself, just like training split, it's also not a major factor. Like in my opinion, it's like whether you're going to do like push pull legs or upper lower or something, going to have a marginal effect in long term. It's more about what's more convenient to you, what you can stick to, what you can be comfortable with, aligned with your schedule during the day. I wonder, like, how are you training right now?
I do. So I actually just switched over to the dark side. So I am not doing calisthenics anymore. I'm doing weight training.
Dark side.
I've always done calisthenics purely for strength and skills. Never, ever, ever done hypertrophy training. And so for some reason, whatever reason, like a few months ago, something just clicked and I just wanted to try to build some muscle. So now I'm doing purely weight training. Not to say that you can't build muscle with calisthenics, of course, because that's a myth. But I've never done actual weight training. I've done weighted calisthenics, which I saw a video where you call everything all like weight training is weighted calisthenics.
Till this day, I get these like comments about this video.
Yeah.
Like there are people arguing all the time about this. Yeah, like technically it is, like weight training as well, because like no matter what you do, then you're lifting, like if I do this, then I'm using my arm, right? So that's calisthenics. If I'm gonna take a dumbbell, then it's weighted calisthenics, right? But I don't want to get into this. It's so irrelevant, by the way. It's like I wonder even like if I would do this video again, it's like only for nerds that just want to nitpick on something.
Yeah. It's just a label.
Yeah, of course. And words absolutely do matter in, for example, like scientific areas, because like you need to communicate with people. But obviously, like I just like pulled it, out of just curiosity. Like street lifting is probably the best name for that, because there are actual competition in street lifting right now. I have many friends that are competing. But I digress. What was your training program?
Yeah, so now I do push-pull legs, and I do abs on push days, actually, and I do lower back on my legs days. I do deadlift on the leg day for my lower back. And
so how is your experience with weight training as a calisthenics person?
It is so weird, man, because there's not a lot of people that do calisthenics in Denmark. So pretty much any gym I would go to, I would be the highest performing calisthenics athlete there. I've never been to a gym where anyone's been a better calisthenics athlete than me. And that's not to say that I'm particularly good. It's just not a lot of people do it. And so going to weightlifting, where I was a complete beginner, was very humbling. Very humbling.
But so it's more humbling, or is it like exciting? Because like
it's very exciting.
I don't know if many people can like relate to this, what we are like talking, but if you've been like into this like for 7 years, I can just see like the difference, for example, between me and my brother, who is just like coming in,
Mhm.
and how big, like I can, look back in years how motivated I was. And there, like there is not like I have this in other areas, and it it's close to calisthenics, right? It's basically calisthenics, but more like I'm teaching about it and stuff like that. But as a person that like as a trainee, for me, like discovering some new activity is very fruitful, I think.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I wonder if it's for you, if it's more of a like if you feel more like it's something new, or is it like getting outside of your comfort zone and it's like something that you need to like actively work against to like this to overcome this sort of weakness. I wonder how it is for you.
It is definitely out of my comfort zone, but I mean, a lot of the principles are the same. I
Exactly.
mean, hypertrophy in general, the principles are the same. You know, the rep ranges, the type of exercises you do, and like the way you move your body. Like for example, an overhead press is so similar to a handstand,
Exactly.
push-ups, except there's more balancing with the handstand push-up, of course. But so many of the exercises are the same. Like they're kind of the same, except for
Yeah, they're
maybe
they're
machine
saying, yeah.
work. I would say, like cable using cables are kind of different and kind of new.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I agree. I agree. I think like machines will give you like the most like new experience,
yeah.
because many times you're dealing with, so like if you're dealing with your body weight, it's basically, like you are lifting like mass,
Mm-hmm.
right? And with weights as well. But on machines, many times the machines are like designed different, like in a way that like these like curves of like resistance and
Yeah.
everything, they're like like they're artificially made to be like
Mm-hmm.
to have a different feeling than if you would like lift a barbell. So
Yeah.
they are, for example, like they're making the exercise that would be very difficult here, they're making this part easy, just like through like working on the mechanism inside the machine. Also, you don't have things like cables with like without it, right? Cables are also different experience. But all the other like machines that are very stable. So if you're doing that as well, then I guess that could be like different for you as well. Like it could be a new experience for you.
Yeah. The resistance comes from different places on machines. Like typically in weight training, like free weight in calisthenics, you fight against gravity. Where
Yeah.
on the machines, the resistance can come from left, right. It can come from up,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
which is really
Absolutely.
exciting, and it opens up more possibilities, and you can be even more creative with your exercises.
Absolutely. Yeah, I never learned like on that point. For example, I would never expand my knowledge as much on, for example, like exercise mechanics, I could call it, if I wouldn't, because it's very simple when you analyze exercise. It's very simple when you do it with free weight or body weight,
Hmm.
because you just like know that the direction of resistance will always be down,
Yeah.
unless you're moving very dynamically and you have to accelerate the weight in different planes. So then you're dealing also with inertia. So I can lift my like the dumbbell here. If I do it very fast, then gravity is not working on it, but I'm dealing with like changing the like accelerating this object. So like in the elevator, right? Or like that's the experiment sort of. So I, in order to change like the place, I need to do it. But most exercises happen very slowly in the gym. So when you're lifting weight, it's just like you look at the exercise and you can estimate, okay, I'm dealing with this resistance, it's working on these muscles. When it comes to machines, because they're like different in terms of like the mechanics, the directions are different, the guiding is different, so they're sometimes guiding your movement path.
Hmm.
It was very interesting for me, especially from the rehab standpoint, where you have a lot of limitations within the movement and you need to find something that will, for example, unload one part but really load the other part, and you're thinking which machine would be good for that, right? These are like the problems that you can sort of like solve in exercise mechanics that are much more difficult when you're dealing with machine exercise. And it's really like it showed me how little I know, like about the subject. So machines are great in that sense, but it's also like I would say they're also really good for working out if you're using them properly. I think like there is a dogma of not using machines. Um, Still, could be still. Maybe it's not anymore. Like I'm not really
Like
in
it's
the.
frowned upon?
Yeah, like when I was like spending a little bit more time on social media like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I think like calisthenics had a label of like functional fitness, functional training, that is like the most functional ultimate way of doing things. And after that, it's like weight training is also cool, but like it's not as cool as calisthenics, and machines are the least cool because they're like taking away all the stabilizers and stuff like that, which is like complete lack of like it completely misses certain points. But like anyways, like I'm not sure how it is right now, like how evolved, because like how this community evolved. I am in this community, but at the same time I'm so rare, like in a public way, that I kind of like miss the general vibes of the community. So if you're in there, maybe you can tell me.
I haven't heard people say machines are are bad, but as I said, I know for sure, like in the calisthenics community, there's a very people are very one sided. If you do calisthenics, you can only do calisthenics. You can't do weights. That's why I called it the dark
Yeah,
side.
yeah. Yeah, but would you say, like, from your perspective, would you say that this community is like evolving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think it was more back when calisthenics was first on the come up, where it was so new and it was so cool and refreshing. You'd never seen it before, really. People were like, "This is the way. There's no other method to do it. This is the coolest." And I mean, now people are kind of getting over it. I think not that I think calisthenics is still growing, but I think there is, with all these very cool YouTubers as well, that's shining light on just the science behind exercise, growing muscle, building strength with all different kinds of exercises and areas. I
Mm-hmm.
think we are starting to see a more well-rounded community, I guess, fitness community, where
Mm-hmm.
people are more
Yeah, but
accepting.
I'm specifically asking, about calisthenics because it's interesting to me. You're so I know that you're, like work. You have your own projects and but I would say that. So, would you call yourself like calisthenics content consumer,
Um,
or not really? Because maybe you're not really like into it anymore as well. I used to be like 4 years ago or 5 years ago. That was only like I was literally like watching like fitness FAQs video. Like after getting back from school, I was watching fitness FAQs, going to the gym, getting back, watching some Al Cavadlo or calisthenics movement or something, and then going to sleep when that video was playing, and then getting up, and like, it was all that I was thinking about. And so I was very aware of the trends within the community itself. And when I started creating my own thing, I quickly realized, like, not quickly, I realized after, when I started making these documentaries, that it just requires for me to absolutely cut my consumption, because I'm just like getting too overwhelmed with the amount of information and inputs that come into me, into like my head. So now I'm not considering myself. At the same time, it's quite important because like technically I'm in this niche. I'm in this, sort of market, I guess. So, so it's important for me to know, but I'm just like not analyzing it. Like I'm not, looking for like what other people are doing. I know many people. with like, for example, like Geek Climber, I'm watching his videos because like I'm participating in them sometimes. So like he's like inviting me for the videos. And he's doing great job. He's like very entertaining. Obviously, I'm following like fitness FAQs podcast sometimes and stuff like that. But the overall like general sense of the community, I kind of like lost the overall direction where it's going.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I'm not consuming that much calisthenics content anymore either. It's I don't consume that much content in general that much anymore. But I was like you. I was completely like you. I watched so much calisthenics content when I was first starting everything. But yeah, I guess I lost touch on that as well.
Did you find that you did it after you started producing yourself?
I don't think I've ever done fitness content.
No,
So,
no, no. Like producing your podcast, like
oh,
something, like putting something out to the
mm,
internet. Like, do you find this to be like you have
I've
like sort of enough?
I've heard a lot of people say this, that they don't like to consume other people's content because they're either afraid of stealing their ideas, or that their ideas will start getting in your head and you will start iterating their ideas, and then you will no longer talk about your
That's
ideas, if that makes sense. That has never been the case for me.
so. What was like the first reason? Once again, so like so they're afraid
They will steal
they
their
will
content.
they will steal their content
Yeah.
by
So like
watching.
for example, let's say you watch a video about doing push-ups, and then,
Yeah.
oh, this guy already did that, I can no longer make a video about
Oh, okay.
push-ups, for
Okay,
example.
okay, got it. Yeah, that's creating like insecurity that you
Yeah.
will be like doing. So yeah, that's what I totally get. Like it could be problematic. It could be, you know, like limiting you a lot.
Yeah. For me, I don't think I've ever felt that way. Cuz everything I've produced, whether it be TikTok, whether it be podcast, I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of people who make the same type of TikTok that I did, and I'm a fan of people who do the same type of podcast that I do. So I've never really had that issue. I've always consumed
Hmm.
um,
I have
content
a
that I enjoyed.
question for you actually, like
Mm-hmm.
another question about that. So you it's interesting to me because you've been like your original email, I remember, like you came from TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that I have like no experience with, but what I know is that TikTok is a platform that is very short form,
Yeah. Oh
very,
yeah.
so you kind of like it's interesting for me because you transitioned from the most short form content possible to the most long form
Yeah.
like format, which is podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Like no in between. Like for example, like documentary videos, I would say are in like are what I'm doing are like close to the long form, right? But then you have like normal YouTube videos, maybe Instagram or something, but like shorts and stuff like that. There are people specializing in it, and it's totally different thing, totally different
Very
content,
different.
totally different people that are like in your, let's say, like in your market, in your
Mm-hmm.
niche audience. So like, how is this experience? Like, what differences did you find, and what do you and like what did you enjoy more so far, or is it completely different that you cannot compare?
It's very hard to compare. What I found very quickly was that it was impossible to get people from TikTok over to a podcast because, one, as you said, short form content versus long form content, people prefer one or the other typically,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just very different content as well. It was comedy skits I did on TikTok, whereas the podcast here is maybe a little bit more serious and for older men.
Yeah.
Older men sounds like it's for old people, but
Yeah,
like my
like
my other audience,
more
yeah,
mature audience,
yeah,
I
my
guess.
my audience on TikTok was like 12-year-olds, so completely different audience, and it's very different because the TikToks were scripted. A lot of planning went into shooting a video, where the podcast here is more raw and authentic. It's a conversation, so it's very, very different.
Hmm. So in terms of enjoyment, like work satisfaction, let's say, do you find something more enjoyable?
That's a tough question because I think I'll have to say that the podcast gives me more enjoyment because in the long term, I feel like it gives me more. Whereas the TikTok, gave me more short-term gratification. And
In what sense? Like, yeah, what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, I guess because the content is so short, the longevity of the actual content itself is also very short. Whereas a podcast lives on YouTube forever. A TikTok video will be watched for 2 weeks, and then it will never be seen again. And that is one of the reasons why I changed to a podcast to this format, and why I don't really do TikTok anymore. It's because I couldn't see the longevity in it. And I couldn't get my personality across in my TikToks because they were scripted. And I think a podcast makes so much more sense for that. It is so much more evergreen. It's something that you can always go back to. It has given me so much more. Like, I get to meet amazing people like you. I get to talk to you, make new friends, new connections. It makes so much more sense to do a podcast for me.
Yeah, I think, you know, I never want to, like, I kind of like sense that it's the answer. But I have a bias as well, right? Because I kind of like do the similar, like I have a similar intent. Like, I started from Instagram and I was doing a lot of posts, and I quickly realized that I'm very bad at, like, I'm really good at like putting the work into something where I have a motivation that I know that this work will be then, you know, like profiting. By profiting, I don't even mean like selfish reasons. I mean just like people will be able to benefit from this
Yeah.
content
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. And, you know, like that's exactly how, like, for example, like documentary works, is that if I put my year into something, that's a lot of time. And obviously, if I enjoy it, that's a good, well spent time. If I learn something in the process, if I know people in the process, and if, you know, overall at the end, I will be able to make a living out of it, obviously that's even better. But just the fact that I'm putting something, like, so much time into something, but knowing that it, you know, like right now someone is watching my video, that helps a lot. To that kind of like inspires me, because then it kind of like works similar to a community. It's like when you build a community, then, you know, within this community, then people will start interacting with each other, and your act of building that community will kind of like then open up this sort of process, this machine that will then like build itself up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I feel the same with the YouTube video, whereas Instagram, obviously, I'm gonna work on that for, like, I was working on my video, let's say 2 days, right? 2 full days. It's much less time. In that time, I could do like 100 posts, 150 posts, probably, with this pretty high quality posts. But the problem is that I would have this feeling that I need to come up with something new right after, because this is gonna take, you know, like Instagram posts will be like 1 week, and then like nobody will like search for it, because like who's gonna search? Like, first of all, like, it's a platform thing, so you don't have search engine in Instagram. But other than that, I myself would not look for this kind of content. Like, if I'm like, it's very often when I hear podcasts that were recorded 8 years ago, but it's very like, I never, you know, search for a post on Instagram for something, and I wouldn't do that even if it had, you know, search engine. I think that there are some platforms that could have search engine, like Pinterest or something. I don't know, but, you know, I would never look for content there. Like, there is something about the video and long format podcast, especially, that, you know, like, you will always sort of benefit from it. You can listen to it, you don't have to watch it. Yeah, so I completely agree with you. I wanted to know your perspective because you have more expertise, you have like more experience as well in both dramatically different worlds, right? But I would say that, yeah, that you know, podcast is more gratifying. Like, yeah, like you will benefit from it more. But I have a bias, obviously.
Yeah, and I mean, just like this long one conversation, there is so many small pieces of value in just this long conversation, right? And even like the TikTok video took longer to make for me than this podcast,
Oh
and
yeah.
yet the podcast provides more value, and especially in the long term. And I think it just compounds. The more podcasts you do, ultimately the longer or the more benefit it will have in the long term.
Yeah, I do agree. And also, there is the aspect that like you can cut the podcast later on and do like short form content out of it, but you cannot do it on the other way
Yeah,
around,
that's true.
right?
Yeah.
So it's also, like you could take this podcast and you could like take every single like tidbit of this conversation and you could like split it to different ways. Like I think you did it last time, right? But you cannot do it the other way around. But it took you, let's say it's going to take you 1.5 hours or something. TikTok video would probably take more overall, especially if there is a lot of editing. But like knowing the longevity is going to be so like, I'm kind of like, having, maybe it's like laziness, to be honest, but it's like for me it would be very heavy on mind to know that I'm working on something and then this thing will disappear very soon and
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to work again
Yeah.
on something new in very short amount of time. Maybe like it's also individually determined what people enjoy. Maybe there are some people that just hate these long-term projects or like hate long formats in terms of like making them. They just don't like the conversations for them are boring and stuff like that. Maybe, but I'm not one of these people, definitely.
Eryk, let everybody know where they can find your work.
You can. I think the best place would be the YouTube channel Frinksmovement TV for now. And if you want to reach out, then probably the best way would be through Instagram Frinksmovement. And for now, that's it. Very soon, maybe there will be some new things, but I cannot really speak on them for now. So that's it. Thank you so much, Patrick, for great conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. Again, it was a blast, and I think we did do as good of a job as we did last time. So
Hopefully,
yeah.
let the audience decide.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of WillCast with Frinksmovement TV. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps out so much more than you realize. And in return, I promise I will keep working hard on making these valuable conversations happen with these amazing guests. The bigger the podcast gets, the bigger the guests we can have on, and the bigger the guests we can have on, the more value I can provide to you, which is ultimately the goal of the podcast. All right. So thank you so much for supporting and subscribing. Peace.